Hello, good afternoon. It is Thursday, June 16th, 2022. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I am your host. My name is Sandel. I am a civils engineer here at Decisions, and I have Kevin over here, who's tag teaming this with me today. So he's actually the co-host, and we're excited to take your questions. We had a question come in earlier on that was asking about currency, a currency box, and how to automatically calculate a value, a total value, by multiplying the quantity and the cost. So I am going to do that right now. I'll share that with you in a second. Can you see my Decision Studio?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, so I will start this by creating a flow. And then we will create a form inside the flow, and we'll see how best we can get that question answered. So I'm going to call this calculate total quantity. Okay. First thing I want to do is drop my form in here. This. Then we're going to create a form. Now, I'm not really sure what version this person is using. If I am using version 8, so I'm going to do this inside version 8. Hopefully, whatever I do will transfer to what you do. So for now, so I'm going to have the price of the item, and
Can I say a quick thing? I'm sorry. I'm doing this on the data repeater.
You're doing it inside the data repeater. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. So we will first drop in a data repeater. There. Bear with me. Do this. And add in one more column here. Expand this out a bit. Let's make that 2 columns. Okay. And then I will expand this, and we can put our add and remove buttons here. All right, so let's create our data repeater. Okay. All right, so here we have 3 fields. Going to have quantity first. Where did that go? Okay, and then we'll have our two currency boxes. One for price and the other for the total price. Yeah, just leave it as total. All right, is this similar to what you have? Take that as a yes. Okay, so we're gonna think of this data repeater as it's a form component. We're gonna think of it as a separate form. So what we can do here, let me pick my don't really have an input type here. Oh. So, since this is technically a form, I would like to use the active form tool to do the calculation for the total field. So let's see if that works.
Quick question. I'm on version 6.2 and we don't have that feature. Do you think is there any other way to do it without the active flow?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm on 6.20 and we don't have the active data flows.
Gotcha. Okay, so then we're gonna go down to legacy and use a data flow. You have that, right? Yes.
If I can just cut in here. Sure. If I'm looking at this question, are we asking simply about just getting the data? It sounds like the calculation's actually running correctly. Is that right? And we just want to save the results of that data into an existing structure?
Yes, the calculation is running because I'm using a label, but when I use the label, I choose pick from data and I use the calculation flow. So I'm not saving the results anywhere in the data structure. That is correct.
Okay. And so
are you trying to just save it into your data structure?
Yes, I just want so for example, quantity and times cost, whenever the user does that, it should show up in the currency box, but it should show save somewhere to everywhere. Like the results should show up. Since it's only a label, it doesn't show anywhere else.
So you're trying to pass out the results from your form.
Yeah, it sounds like what we're encountering is simply labels are going to work that way, and that they're used for typically read-only values. If you'd like to store that off, that would actually be done in either the flow outside of the form, or we could make a text box, but then have the text box set to non-editable on your form. So it would act kind of in the same way as that label. However, it becomes, like what you're used to using, a text box, and that has an output that you could then save into your data structure or use in further evaluations.
Gotcha. I try to use the text box, but when I do pick from data and I choose that calculation flow that I made on the data flows, it says that it's not correct. And it throws an error, but it only works if I do a label.
How about this? Are you able to share your screen?
I cannot because I'm using my personal computer to Zoom. That's why I don't have the flow on this computer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, you're okay.
I think in a case like this, it might be one where we would need to, take a look at the specific flow. That sounds probably just more like something needs to be mapped differently or to achieve that desired goal there. In that end, I would probably advise if we could send get a support ticket rolling for that one. The decision support team typically assists with those types of things. I can grab some information here and make sure we get that sent out as well. Just to get them keyed in. But I would think we would want to look at the actual flow there. I'm happy to show you some potential tricks we could use. But if you've already tried the text box and it's just not giving the right value, it's running just not the right math, for lack of a better term, it's probably just a mapping thing to solve.
Gotcha. Because the only thing if I was wondering how you had a currency box, if there was a way to run a data flow on that currency box, but you get the value from your data structure. In the data repeater, we always do form, that's how I do form dot total. If there's any way to do that.
So you have an existing data structure and you just want to take the values from it, put that into your repeater or have available in your repeater?
Yes, and then run if there's a way to run a calculation on the top of that.
Yeah, we certainly can. So in that case, you would define the data repeater type as that type. That would be on the first form, not the repeater form. So like the parent
right
form
here,
level. Yep.
Right here, where it says, sorry. No.
Yeah.
Inside the data repeater?
And so for what we would do here, if you wanted to do a repeater, well, actually, let me back up a moment. Is this going to be your results that you're displaying on this in the repeater? Do you intend users to edit them, or are they also just kind of as a whole read-only? You just want them there to show calculations and the results therein?
On the main form, they can put the values and they can do it but then I send like an approval form, and that's where I just don't want that that's just a read-only form.
Okay, so then I would actually probably advise a split there. As in the data repeater is typically a bit, I guess, heavier than you would say than a data grid would be what I would advise for the approval form there. As a data grid can be configured to do exactly that. You tell it a data type, what columns you want displayed, and it just loads it for you. What we see on screen, if we look to the right where we see that form data picker, we can define what we'd like on the repeater here. So you would want to pick that complex type. You just go ahead and pick any of them, and the responses or requests are completely fine. Yeah, just go ahead and pick any of those. And so then you're able to define at the flow input level what you would like that to be. And if we hit pick from data here, we can go ahead and say form data and get those values from inside that data structure, like those columns or those fields. There's a couple different ways to do that. I think, again, I hate to refer back, but I would probably advise a support request for this one, just so we can take a look at it and advise the best fit for you specifically based on what you've already built. And so you don't have to go back and, re-engineer a whole lot of stuff.
Gotcha, because I get to this point where you're right now form data and I choose, for example, an ID. And then after that, I get like confused that how do I put the calculation in it to like get the cost and the quantity times.
Yeah, and that would come from the form level above this one. Let's go ahead and save and close this if we can. Can we define the data name, Fandel, right there on the right? We can just call it incoming values. And then we can go ahead and close and save this form. And so on the inputs of this form, we should have now incoming values, where it's a list of that type. And so this sends it into the form, which then the repeater picks up on and says, okay, the list that I've grabbed, I need to display that. Again, if you have this configured as is, then there more than likely is just a mapping error at play here.
I have them as a constant right now because my business user wanted to see the one row always, the first one.
If we're defining constant data, then that certainly might explain why we're not seeing the intended results. If it's always just going to run off of some constant there, that might be kind of interfering with it. But again, we would need to look in order to see that, to confirm.
Gotcha. I'll just send the information and I'll put the decision support ticket, so it will be easier for you guys to see the flow.
Yeah, they'll definitely jump on, schedule a call to take a look at it for you. It sounds like it should be an easy 5-10 minute fix, to be honest.
Awesome, and I'll just submit it like a regular support ticket, right? I don't have to mention anything else. Okay. Awesome.
No, just support@decisions.com. You can just send an email to that with a little bit of information about the issue at hand here, and someone will reach out.
Awesome, will do. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. The next question. I have a column on a report that is a run inline flow function so that it provides a link to download attachments for any requests in the report. However, how do I hide the download link in this column if there is no attachment? You just want to hide the download link on the report.
Yeah, so let's say I have 10 requests, but only say 5 of them have an actual attachment. Right now, all of them have a column that runs that inline flow and lets me download the attachment. However, it shows up for everything. It should only show up if there is an attachment. So there's really not a great way it seems, or straightforward way it seems, to kind of control that visibility like you would on a form.
Right.
I've tried a few different things and none of it worked. So I'm just wondering if there is a way to kind of get that working. So every single line doesn't have, or row rather, doesn't have a download link, because it just, if you click it and there's no attachment, it just doesn't do anything, which is frustrating for the user.
Hey, Dave, how you been?
Yeah, pretty good. Yourself?
Can't complain. Been a while since we got to speak. So did I hear correctly that you're using a flow inline field for that column?
I am. Yeah. I know we were on with Eric yesterday and we got that working. It was just one little simple thing that I had missed. But it works too well, right? So
yeah, fair enough. So what I could actually think offhand to do there is if you already have the flow inline field built, that means it's already got an output for the expected correct there. What I would do is right before that end step, add a simple rule that just checks to see if that attachment is null or if it's there or not. And if it's not, have a second output step that outputs a different value that just says nothing on it. Then what you can do is use that specific value sort or that override on the report to then just say, if this value is returned, don't show anything. That way your existing solution will keep working exactly as you have for showing the download icon. Yeah. But then you're just adding a couple two-step override for if it puts out that one value. And you can make that string anything you'd like, or just a Boolean, anything.
Okay, can I share my screen to kind of walk through that if we have time?
Go for it.
All right. Let's can I get the ability to, I think you need to make me a presenter or something, or panelist.
It might not allow it for that. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I just promoted him to panelist.
There
so
we
you
go.
Can share.
There
Perfect.
we go. All right. So here, okay, cool. So I've got my. Let me show you real quick my report. Yeah, download NDA, of course, right? So I'll go in here and edit that flow. I did have a rule like that because there is actually on the form that is submitted by the user there. You don't even have to check for an attachment. You could technically check to see if the user had said, do you want to upload your attachment? Because then we use a form flow to show the file upload. So actually you could build it off that. So I had that rule up here, but it was operating properly. It just wasn't changing anything on the report. So you said there were 2 steps that we should add towards the end, right?
Yeah, I would just add a rule to check. And again, we're just looking for if it's there basically. So if it's null, we could, and that's already contained somewhere in a data structure. We have a pre-built rule that is just for object is null. You could use there. That would work exactly for that. This is a true false path. I think if you just search is null, you should be able to find it as well. Either one, that should work. It'll all work. Yeah, object is null. And so it's just a really simple rule that just takes in what would be a generic .NET object. Anything really you can evaluate. It's just, is this value null?
Yeah. So actually it would just be, so it's a file reference in my flow entity execution extension.
Okay. So it looks like you're fetching off of that reference.
Yeah, I am. So I'm actually just, yes, I'm getting this selected row and taking the ID, passing it over here, and then doing that ID equals, and then it's returning that ID, and then it, does this open URL, which seems to work well. That way you can skip that little form and nobody has to click twice. So over here, I would want to run this kind of.
It would be the very, very last thing in the entire flow. Yeah, so I would, in this case, it looks like we've got a single result. So you might connect all result paths to it. We may need to build a few, although it looks like, can I ask just for a little more details on what occurs here, or what's the difference between, multiple results being output and just a singular one?
And that's a great question. And I don't know because I was just following support's lead on this one.
Fair.
It says, show path for one result. But it doesn't seem like it's
It
necessary,
goes down to
right?
it goes down to the end form session is what it appears to be. And if you can click on the end form session, maybe I can get a little more information just from kind of looking over at it. That appears, we're doing something different when we get to a single result versus that. It looks like with multiple results, it just exits, meaning we would never, or if multiples returned, just kind of leave. We wouldn't want anything to occur. It sounds like you had said, the single result is the desired here. So I would add it, I would probably put it before that end form session on the object as null path. Yeah, kind of in between right there. Yeah, and so it's going to evaluate the results of that fetch to see, did I actually maybe I grabbed an item, but that file is null. I still want to see the items records, but if there's no file, then go do something else and don't offer me the URL ability.
Right.
And so you want to map in whatever that field might look like on that. And I'm not sure which one it would be. I'll defer to you.
Yeah, we, oh gosh, what was I think?
The entity result, though, most likely because it's on the single result tab.
Yeah. And there's the NDA attachment. It's a file reference. So at this point, I think you should be looking for a file URL. And if that's null,
that could work. Would it not? It should have with this data, I guess the way I would ask is, it shouldn't have a URL because you don't want it to be shown, but or would you show URLs even if the file itself is kind of blank or null, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I would not. I mean, I wouldn't have anything.
Because it might do that. It might be like file data contents that you're checking to see if they're null, to see if the actual file. It could be, a different field like that. But that's, again, just kind of one of those specific mappings you might want to play with. I would think this pattern would, or at least should work for you. Further tinkering might always be needed.
Okay. Yeah, that's, like I know that this. Okay, so now it's actually not. Yeah, it's not actually working. So I believe it is gonna have to go. I'll have to go back and play with that and see what happens. So
that would be the pattern I'd use. Again, we just need to play around with the actual mappings in there to check, but maybe try the file data instead of the URL just to see, because it may still have a hosted URL even if it doesn't actually contain anything. I'm just not familiar enough with this particular project. I maybe would pick file data or contents particularly, instead of just to go one level deeper to, because we might have some metadata, but let's see if the actual file itself is null, and you can just hit done on that.
Okay. Yes. Should have worked in preview, but you never know. Sometimes you just need to run it.
Yeah, and again, I'm fully willing to defer that. I might not have the right field again mapped on that, but as long as we understand what I'm doing here or what we're doing here, trying to.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's much further than I've gotten before, so I can play around with that and see what happens.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Happy to work on that one. You could even just add rules or overrides and things like that if we just wanted to kind of make it visual. So there's a few other ways.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Awesome. I do not see any other questions. Does anyone have any questions that they haven't yet put down? Sure, go ahead. Bradley?
Yes. So I called in last week, and I think maybe I talked to Will a couple of times. I haven't heard back yet. It was the ability to control the visibility of repeater fields from selections in the parent form. And I'm on version 8.
So when you say visibility, we're just talking like these certain actual columns themselves, a user based on some earlier criteria or a true false should be shown in a field on it or not?
Correct. Like the example I'm using is a travel request form, and the repeater is each traveler. If it's an international trip that's selected on the main form, I don't want to show the passport field or fields in each traveler line in the repeater.
Got it. Okay. So on the form component, under the, give me one moment, just going to pull it up locally to reference. Of course, I don't have a form right here. 2 seconds, just for the exact drop down. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Once we, it's going to be under view as the category. I want to set, or excuse me, behavior. My apologies, give me the wrong one. And so under behavior, as that drop down, you'll see a couple that say initially visible and initially enabled source. They default to constants, but you can set those to from flow data and just give it a value when the little resulting pop-up to name it. I would call it like should be shown or something similar to that. Then based on a rule that you might do earlier on the flow, you pass that true or false onto that value. And so it determines if that thing's true, I'm going to show this form. If it's false, it wouldn't, then not. So in your case, the check would be, is this an international flight passenger? If so, show it. If not, false, hide it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can share, give me one moment to kind of highlight that here. Yeah, and so I've just got, this is just a drop down on the form, nothing too fancy here. But so I have a from flow data and then initially visible source. We would say is international, maybe as an example here to remind myself what this is. So let me actually finish this form out a little better. I won't rename anything just for the sake of speed here. And let me go put it into a flow. There we go. All right. And so on that is international, I might be able to have a rule right in front of it that does some evaluation that if true or outputs that true or false for me. However we want to get that value is really up to us. But based on this, I'll leave it as constant there. You can see how this will both show and hide that item on the form.
So I have a parent form and then a repeater. So I want to be able to hide the field on the repeater based off of a selection on the parent form. Is this?
Yeah, it would work the exact same way. Yeah, it would just be shown from flow data. It would be a couple different picks. Let me see if I can build something, or we might switch over to Sandel, as I know you already have that repeater built up. But it's going to be this: whenever we're dealing with, showing of visibility or enabling or disabling showing that on some criteria, this is your dropdown.
Okay.
And we could do the same exact set of behaviors for if we want it to be enabled or not.
All right, I will give that a shot.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It looked like Muriel had raised her hand.
I did.
Okay.
I will go ahead and ask my question. So I'm about to put in a change for a project. Right now it's in our development environment. We're going to move it to test, and then there's already a working production environment. Part of the change that I'm putting in has extra fields in my case data structure. And I wanted to know if it's a best practice to, what I was planning now is just importing that change over. So just importing the entire data structure. I don't think it'll matter for test because I can add and delete things as I please, but is that going to cause me a problem in production? And should I just manually add the fields?
Do we use the decisions repository for versioning and checking these changes in and out, or are you doing manual import exports? Okay.
We're doing manual import exports on version 6.
Okay. So it's been a little bit on version 6. I'll have to give me a second to kind of think back on that one. I would want to say in version 6, so an import and overwriting that data structure should work enough in that case. Whenever we deal with this kind of subject here, it's what we would refer to as changes to in-flight data. Is the concern's always, I'm making a change to an underlying type or something that I do have existing data that's currently using. And typically, while it's a case-by-case basis, we really have to start thinking on what are we changing? Adding a new field that that hasn't been evaluated yet in any of our flows will cause no problems, for example.
And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. If you're just adding a field that's flow in production, there's nothing that's going to look at it. It's just a extra data point. That's really just the equivalent of adding a column in a table. It's not going to do anything. It becomes a little more involved when we're dealing with things like changing maybe something from an integer to a decimal on an existing type, those types of things. Those are the more, we need to take special precautions or make sure that we make the changes at the right time, that they're being converted over, those types of things. And that's where it gets a little more case by case. But if we're just adding a new string field to an existing data type, and you're not even using it yet, you're just kind of preparing, you should be completely fine to just import and overwrite it.
Okay, and I know I said version 6, so you had to think back. Does that change any? Would you recommend the repository going forward? How
Yes.
does that?
The repository would account for that, as it is designed to do build for those changes. Should you make a change to both a flow or an underlying data structure in some of your projects, the repository will essentially just update your existing elements for that.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I would probably advise in that case, just because it does involve production data, and send in a message to decision support as well. I know I feel apologies the second time on this call, but I would probably just advise that, safe over sorry type thing in that regard, is they can probably spend a little more time to get with you on the exact specifics of your project and the change you're about to make, to let you know if that, they think it's a good idea, and have someone on hand potentially while you make that change in case we need to roll things back or do whatever it might be.
For a different reason, I've already requested that someone be on hand for that change. So.
Fair enough. So
Okay.
I see great minds think alike then.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Not a problem at all.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions for today's Lunch and Learn? I will take that as a no. And guess I'll let you guys go on early. Give you 26 minutes back of your time. Thank you all so much for coming. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me and knocking this out of the park as usual. Thanks to everyone for being here.